The Stone Zone with legendary Republican strategist and political icon and pundit Roger Stone. Stone has served as a senior campaign aide to 3 Republican presidents. He is a New York Times best-selling author and a longtime friend and advisor of President Donald Trump. As an outspoken libertarian, Stone has appeared on thousands of broadcasts, spoken at countless venues, and lectured before the prestigious Oxford Political Union and the Cambridge Union Society. Due to his 4+ decades in the political and cultural arena, Stone has become a pop culture icon. And now, here's your host, Roger Stone.
Welcome, I'm Roger Stone, and you are back in the Stone Zone. We join you today with breaking news. Investigative journalist James O'Keefe learned this morning that the Department of Justice was dropping the charges against him pertaining to his possession of Ashley Biden's diary. This is an extraordinary development, and it's interesting because James and I were together just night before last, I guess it was. We talked about our mutual experiences of being raided by the FBI, the injustice of it all. In his case, even more egregious than in my case, perhaps, because he's a journalist and he was doing what journalists do. Joining us now, my good friend from O'Keefe Media, James O'Keefe.
Roger, great to be with you.
James, like me, looked like he got ready in a hurry, but I'm very grateful that you are with us. This is a shocking and very happy development. The raid on your home was, as I just said, as egregious and outrageous than the raid on my home, perhaps worse, because you do what they do at the New York Times, at the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal. You engage in the act of journalism. You never even published Ashley Biden's diary. What are your feelings at this moment?
Well, Roger, I've been through a lot in my life, like you, so I don't really feel a lot, except to say that it's very unusual for the Department of Justice to close an investigation like this. My lawyer said in 30 years, he's only seen it a few times. Usually there's an indictment or it sort of fades away. So I'm really interested to know what was in the affidavit that they used as the probable cause to raid my home, because that's going to give us a lot of answers. And the court has said they will release the affidavit. The question is, are they going to release it unredacted? And are we going to find out what was the probable cause? It's never happened before in American history for the FBI to raid a newsroom. That just doesn't happen. So I think we have an interest in seeing what that probable cause was and who, if anybody, lied to the FBI. It's going to be interesting to see what develops here.
Yeah, as I recall, you told me this the other night. The charge against you was transporting a document over a state line. Isn't that what the New York Times does? The Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal?
Yeah, it's the paragon of investigative journalism for reporters to receive information that may or may not have been stolen from somebody else. So in this case, they said that the document was stolen. No, I didn't steal the document. I don't believe it was stolen. I believe it to be abandoned. But even if it was stolen by somebody else, the Supreme Court, in a case called Barnicki v. Vopper, 2001, protects the right of a reporter to publish stolen information. We all know about the Pentagon Papers. You could even solicit information that was stolen. That's from the WikiLeaks case from 2017, Russian Federation WikiLeaks. So it's really unusual, and Merrick Garland, the former Attorney General, expressly forbids violent raids. They could have just called my lawyer. So this was an act of violence to intimidate the press, and frankly, to chill out sources that are coming to me. I talk to people inside the government every day. I'm always in a different place, meeting with a confidential source. So what this was an attempt to intimidate people like me and the people who are coming to me inside these agencies. And that's why it's so egregious, and that's why there's such a constitutional crisis. This case is so important.
You're exactly right. This was the whole purpose of the raid on my home. I mean, a nonviolent First time crime by someone who didn't have a passport nor a weapon, therefore not a flight risk, not a danger to anyone, no previous criminal record. The idea here is to intimidate you, to try to silence you, and in my case, to try to get me to testify falsely against President Donald Trump, which of course I didn't do. We have a short video of you here. We're going to roll that, and then I'm going to ask you for some more questions.
The case is over. It's done.
The case is over.
I mean, this doesn't happen all that often where a grand jury investigation results in no charges. I mean, it certainly has happened to me, probably 10 times in 30 plus years. It's not very common. But in a case like this that was purely political, it's the result that I expected for a while now.
You're talking there to Jeffrey Lichtman, one of the finest criminal defense lawyers in the country. I'm glad that he's representing you. He's a very good man. Talk to people about the raid, what went down that day in your home, because it's chilling, but it's a story that I think needs to be told.
And thanks for mentioning Jeff. Jeff's a great guy. I've worked with Roger. I've worked with a lot of lawyers, and I've had bad experiences. But I'm not just saying this because of this case. I find Jeff to be very pleasant to work with, and that's saying a lot about him. The raid, it was a 6 a.m. raid, much like your raid, and much like Roger. In your case, CNN messaged you or called you. I forget which one. They called you or texted you right afterwards. In my case, the New York Times reporter messaged me within minutes of the raid, and somehow they got a copy of a confidential grand jury proceeding. And they came into my apartment with huge flashlights and guns, and they had vests, Velcro vests, kind of blinded me. Now, I was in my underwear at 6 a.m. I opened the door. I said, I'm opening the door now because I didn't want them to shoot me, if I flinched the wrong way. And they proceeded to ransack my apartment, go through books, go through clothes. I have a small 2-bedroom apartment in Westchester County, New York. And what was really interesting, Roger, is, I learned from my first encounter with the FBI in New Orleans in 2010 not to talk to the FBI. So the only thing out of my mouth was, I want to speak to my lawyer. I want to speak to my lawyer. I must have said that 19 times. And finally, the agents, who looked a little nervous, I think they realized the historic and egregious nature of what they were ordered to do. The FBI agents there in Westchester County proceeded to give me my iPhone so I could call my lawyer, and they brought me into my bathroom with the door ajar. I proceeded to unlock the phone to call my lawyer, and as soon as the phone starts ringing, they snatch the phone out of my hand, change the settings on the phone so that it won't go to sleep, and then put it in an evidence bag. So now the FBI has access to my signal, my text messages, and of course, because I'm a journalist, I've got sources in the Department of Justice and got everywhere else you can imagine. That's what makes this so horrible. And then I told you the story at the end of the raid. This little short FBI agent, I'm in handcuffs, and he says, "Mr. O'Keefe, do you have any questions?" I was thinking to myself, yeah, I have thousands of questions. I didn't say anything, but it was kind of in a state of trauma, and I would say like PTSD from this ridiculous encounter. And then after 2 hours they left, and I was just sitting there wondering what just happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is obviously God is good, and somebody at the Justice Department, perhaps Pam Bondi herself, recognized the outrageousness and illegality of what was done to you. Frankly, I hope that Kash Patel will look into those FBI agents. Their defense will be, well, I was only following orders. I told you this the other night at dinner. Even to this day, retired agents come up to my wife and I when we're seen in public and say, either I was there at your home that morning, and I didn't want to be there. I thought what they did was terrible, but I was only following orders. Other times, retired agents will come up to see it and say, in all the time I worked at the Bureau, I never saw anything like that. Why didn't they just call your lawyer and have you come turn yourself in, which of course would have been the normal procedure. But this was meant to have a chilling effect on you, on me. That was the idea. It's an abuse of power. and a perfect example of the outrageous weaponization of the criminal justice system. You raise a very important question, and that is whether the documents the government now releases will be redacted. In my case, my lawyers asked for Robert Mueller's final unredacted report. I'm allowed to see all of the evidence against me. The Constitution says so. And Judge Amy Berman Jackson ruled that she would personally review the Mueller report and give my lawyers those sections of it she thought were relevant. She left out the section in which Mueller actually admits that he found no evidence of Russian collusion, no evidence of collaboration with WikiLeaks. In fact, he said he couldn't find any other crime. He went on to say that if he had found that I had gotten documents from WikiLeaks, which he did not, that wouldn't even have been a crime. So it's very important now that we find out whether perhaps Ashley Biden lied under oath when she was questioned about the origins and history of this document.
Yeah, the unredacted affidavit, as your audience may know, in order to get a search warrant, you have to provide probable cause to a magistrate judge. And those New York magistrate judges, Roger, they just stamp anything they put in front of them. So it's going to be very interesting to see who the confidential informants were. And I think, listen, there's been a lot of injustice. Yourself, January 6th. I mean, there's countless injustices. I think the venality here is a different caliber because you're talking about a newsroom. You just don't raid journalists in America. You don't point guns at, and by the way, if they did this to CNN, the New York Times, if the Trump administration, I would be the first person to come out against it. You just don't do that in this country because we have this First Amendment. It's a cliche, but the First Amendment is first for a reason. So therefore, I think the government's going to say, well, we have to protect the privacy of the witnesses, blah, blah, blah. Listen, if you're going to take a battering ram to a journalist's door, the public's right to know what the probable cause is outweighs whatever marginal privacy interest for the witnesses involved. And the government shouldn't have done it. And I'm considering my options. I may in fact sue the Justice Department. Now, Roger, you brought up a good point. The FBI agents just following orders. This is a really interesting point you bring up because people are split. Should they have done that? Is it just the supervisor's fault? In fact, in New York City, an FBI agent came up to me in December at a Christmas party, and he said that to me too. He said, James, I'm so sorry. I was against what they were doing, and I pushed back on him. I said, why didn't you speak up? And he said, well, I just, got my kids and my pension. And so this is one of the issues in our country. And I call it the line in the sand, which is the title of the film I made about the border, which is people in the government having balls, having a conscience, telling the truth, even if it comes at great personal risk to them. So this is really the issue at hand. Are these FBI agents who did this, are they culpable? I mean, what are your thoughts, Roger, or just the supervisors involved?
I read the transcripts of the Nuremberg trials and reading the testimony of the Nazi prison guards who were pushing Jews into the gas chambers. You know what they said? Well, I was only following orders. I mean, why weren't they saying no? Why weren't they walking off the job? Perhaps they would have been killed. But there is a line in the sand. In my case, the raid on my home at 6 o'clock in the morning came at 6 o'clock. At 6:06, I was arrested. At 6:10, CNN texted my lawyer a copy of my sealed indictment, an indictment that would not be unsealed until 11 o'clock that morning by a DC magistrate. So how is it possible that CNN has the document before my lawyers have access to the document? And then, of course, when you examine the metadata tags of the document, which had no timestamps or court markings on it, it has the initials of the man who wrote it, Andrew Weissman, the de facto head of the Mueller investigation. I've seen Weissman. He's a legal analyst on MSNBC. I guarantee you his asshole is puckering right now because this guy was involved throughout his entire career in egregious crimes, lying under oath about mob murders to cover them up. At least 14 men murdered. He covers up those murders, and the murderer hasn't been brought to justice for them. In fact, now the murderer is doing a podcast. Destroying Enron, destroying Arthur Andersen, Enron's accounting firm. Uh, he fails to mention, whenever he points about the Enron case, talks about it as if it's some paragon of excellent prosecution, that he was reversed unanimously by the U.S. Supreme Court, and they tongue lashed him for his prosecutorial misconduct. This is the same guy who destroyed the cell phones of the Mueller investigators while they were under subpoena from special counsel John Durham. So Pitbull, as he likes to call himself, the most corrupt prosecutor in U.S. history, is now lashing out because he realizes that perhaps he is going to be subjected to the same treatment that he subjected others to, except for in his case, it will be legitimate because he has engaged in treasonous crimes, and hopefully he'll be brought to justice. In your case, I think this proves a number of things. First of all, it proves that God is good. You didn't move for this. You weren't asking for this. You didn't expect this. This comes as a breaking news story. I spoke to a New York Times reporter very early this morning who told me about it and asked me for my reaction. And I said, well, you realize that if it could happen to James, it could happen to you. I mean, that you and James do the same thing. You're both journalists. You may not like his form of journalism. That's your right. But you cannot deny that what he does is journalism. Just because you don't like his point of view and the information that he's trying to make public. Were there ever any New York Times or Washington Post editorials decrying the outrageousness of the raid on your home?
Very interesting question. I mentioned the name of the reporter you spoke with. National security reporters of the New York Times were the only news organization in the legacy media that were not supportive of me because I was suing the New York Times for defamation. The national security reporters at the New York Times and the Department of Justice, the FBI, are almost in a symbiotic relationship because, of course, the DOJ would feed the national security reporters of the New York Times. So they were the exception, but it would shock you perhaps to know in your audience that the American Civil Liberties Union, a very liberal, classically libertarian group, came to my defense. The ACLU hasn't really defended a so-called conservative group in many years. The Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press came to my defense. I think, Roger, a lot of these media groups recognized that this was they crossed the line, and they filed amicus to unseal the affidavit. They realized there was a guy named Ben Smith at the New York Times, this is 3 years ago, who bravely tweeted out right after the raid, guys, we shouldn't be cheerleading this. We should not be cheerleading the government raiding journalists' homes. And as soon as Ben Smith did that, then an avalanche of, Ed Snowden came out, Wolf Blitzer came out. It was really unusual to see everyone agreeing on something. I think there's still consensus in this country that you just don't do this. But the national security reporters of the New York Times, Roger, were the exception. They wanted me to go to jail, and it was really sick. These are not well people, I think, at the New York Times.
Well, I'm not at liberty to tell you the name of the Times reporter because I respect the rules that are laid down when you speak to journalists. And sometimes you're off the record, sometimes you're on background. But I see what you're saying about the Times. We now learned this morning that the Times was receiving millions of dollars from USAID, just like Politico. So as I have said many, many times on my Twitter feed and my X feed, Politico is not a news organization. This is not a journalistic enterprise. This is a propaganda front for the deep state. And now we know they were funded by the deep state. This is sadly true also for the New York Times. And I'm not saying that every reporter and every story at the New York Times is not legitimate. Many are not. But it's a sad commentary when we learn that the Mockingbird press is still very much functioning. People don't really know the history of this, but quite simply, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, probably the two most famous reporters of all time, the guys who falsified the story of Watergate for the Washington Post because their narrative is essentially false, were very successful, very celebrated, made millions of dollars off their book and their movie. Woodward put his money into real estate and safe investments. Carl Bernstein used his on blow and hookers. And at some point, Carl ran out of money. Then he heard that Woodward was going to do a college tour, but was cutting him out. So he wrote an epic story for Rolling Stone, which completely exposed the whole Mockingbird program. And that's how we know about it. But we weren't certain it was still in operation. Now we know it was very much in operation.
I've not heard that entire story, but I agree that, and I think that the New York Times does some great reporting, particularly international. I read the New York Times every day, by the way. But to kind of bring this full circle, and I've confronted these New York Times reporters who were attacking me, and I said, how can you not agree with the First Amendment? Why do you hate the First Amendment? But I think Roger, I think it's a little bit of access journalism. They're kind of slaves to their access to the FBI and the DOJ. And that creates biases that makes them more favorable to what the government is doing. And what I'm doing and what we've been doing is fighting for their rights. These are about all of our rights, not just mine. We're fighting for the Constitution and for the right of a reporter to report information. So that's one of the reasons I do undercover work, because I don't have to be a slave to access when I'm meeting with the deep state and I'm interviewing them covertly. I don't need their consent. I don't need to be a slave to what they're feeding me. I think that's one of the problems with journalism historically. So we need an independent press. We need citizens. And I think it's going to be very fascinating to know. And you also mentioned Ashley Biden. Did she lie to the FBI, which is a crime, as we know? Was there a confidential informant at Project Veritas at the FBI? As you all know, I was fired from the company I founded in a bizarre series of events. So God is good. The world is round, as I say. Karma is real. And the plot thickens here a day after the Department of Justice case closed against me. Really, really fascinating developments.
Final question, just to make sure people understand the historical chain of events here. You never actually published or utilized this diary in any way. Is that correct?
Correct. I did not publish the document. People gave me a lot of flack for that, and I'll tell you why I didn't. Number one, the diary, I was fairly certain it was actually Biden. I even hired a handwriting expert, but I wasn't 100% certain. And people, Roger, they're always trying to set me up, infiltrate me, send me fake things. So that was the first reason I didn't publish it. Second reason I didn't publish it is I was not able to ascertain whether what Ashley wrote in the diary actually happened. It was a little bit confusing. She said something about showers with her dad, inappropriate, and I didn't know what that meant. And it turns out, as I said to you at dinner, that I'm a better journalist than I thought I was, because when the FBI came and knocking, that kind of that legitimized the document as being real. And since when does the FBI investigate abandoned diaries? That's not even a local misdemeanor. So, I think what happens in this country is that the left pushes too far. They go too far, and then the people push back. And this was just a line that they should never have crossed. And I don't think it should ever happen again on American soil. And I like I said, I may sue the government here. I'm looking to do that. Unfortunately, a lot of these people probably left the Justice Department, but there's no amount of money that the U.S. government can give me to make me whole after they, for years, chilled out and scared away the people in the agencies who are trying to talk to me and feed me information about what's really happening. So no, I didn't publish the document. And they still rated me. They still rated me even though I didn't run the story. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I recall getting a call from the New York Post immediately after you were rated for comment, and they made it their headline. I said, Joe Biden is using the FBI as his personal Gestapo. That was the headline. I still feel that way. But look, Pam Bondi, who was a great attorney general here in the state of Florida, confirmed yesterday as Attorney General of the United States. This is going to be a breath of fresh air. And she's committed to recalibrating the scales of justice at our Justice Department. So there'll be only one tier of justice, and only those who've actually committed crimes will be prosecuted. Perhaps only those who've actually committed real crimes will be raided. I have to do this. James, tell people where they can see your great work.
O'KeefeMediaGroup.com. Our foundation is called Citizen Journalism Foundation. You can donate to us, follow us on X at James O'Keefe III. And every week we're putting out a new story investigating the administrative state, the deep state. Stay tuned.
All right. I want to thank James O'Keefe, my good friend of many years, a crusading journalist, a fighter for the truth. He's suffered greatly for his commitment to truth and our Constitution and to in educating the American people. He jumped on here at very late notice. I really appreciate being with you, James. I really enjoyed the fellowship the other night. God bless you, my friend.
God bless you, Roger. See you soon.
Well, God is good. Yet another wrong, egregious wrong by the Biden administration has now been corrected. Donald Trump moving quickly to make America great again, keeping promise after promise. The USAID scandal just becomes more and more outrageous. They clearly doing what the CIA used to do, but they don't require presidential finding. So we're going to learn that they were deeply involved in the impeachments, deeply involved in the Russian collusion hoax, toppling governments. I'm going to sue to see what their involvement was in my case. This is the deep state's slush fund, an unaccountable slush fund that they were using for strictly political purposes. This was originally a department of government that came into being based solely on an executive order by John F. Kennedy. The Congress never mandated its existence. And its original purpose was a good one, which was to help developing countries, but is morphed into something far, far worse. It is morphed into a political operation where their black ops are carried out. The president shut it down, and now we're going to have full disclosure of all their activities. The man who must be given credit for this is Elon Musk and Doge. The more you see those on the left attacking Elon, the greater testimony it is to his effectiveness in this role and the importance of the entire Doge mission. So hats off to him as well as President Trump for shedding light on what's going to turn out to be one of the greatest scandals of our time. Many of you know that President Donald Trump has ordered the government and the national security apparatus to release all of the classified documents pertaining to the murder of President John F. Kennedy. This is something I have fought long and hard for, going all the way back to 2017, when the Kennedy Assassinations Document Act first mandated that this material be made public for every American to see. Now, right now, even as we speak, bureaucrats are furiously figuring out how they can try to hide pieces of this. My good friend Congressman Tim Burchett is already sent a letter to the president warning him that the plan that must be put forward by the NSA to release this material must be broad and wide and sweeping, so nothing can yet be hidden. Even more material on the assassination of Senator Robert F. Kennedy on the eve of his smashing victory in the California primary for president in 1968, as well as the documents pertaining to the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King. I'm told there are over 5 million pages of documents, not most of it from the JFK archive, which is largely but not completely been released, but none of the material on these horrible assassinations. I did suggest to the president last week that he should also order the release of all the classified documents pertaining to the attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan. We still haven't been told what happened there. All we really got was a brief statement by Vice President George Bush, who was tasked with heading a working group looking into the assassination. I think, as you will find, that's an egregious conflict of interest. I'll be publishing a book about the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan in just a few months. In the meantime, if you're interested in the Kennedy assassination, It's amazing the way the thesis of my 2013 book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, is coming into clear view. Now, I'm not saying that LBJ did this alone. What I'm saying is he was at the helm of a plot that included the Central Intelligence Agency. That's why Mike Pompeo objected to the release of the Kennedy assassination documents in 2017, but also involved organized crime, big Texas oil. I prove how the Secret Service stood down that day, as they did in Butler, Pennsylvania last year. I also prove the involvement of the banking interests. I'm going to be bringing it out with a new chapter soon, but you can order your copy today, and you'll see that the shocking audio that Alex Jones released just days ago, in which Cliff Carter, the executive director of the Democrat National Committee under LBJ's chief political operative, and Billy Sol Estes, one of the most famous cronies of LBJ, a man who later went to prison for corruption, corruption that involved Johnson, but of course Johnson was president, so he wasn't charged, are talking, and they confirm the central theory of my book, which is Malcolm Mac Wallace, whose fingerprints are found on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building, and who 6 eyewitnesses say they see in the window of the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building, from which the bullets, some of the bullets that hit JFK were shot, is now confirmed in this shocking new audio tape. You can get your copy of my book by going to The Man Who Killed Kennedy, the case against, The Man Who Killed Kennedy.com, themanwhokilledkennedy.com. And I'll be happy to send you a signed copy. I'll even personalize it for you if you wish. Now, you could go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or some other international or national corporation that hates your guts. But if you choose to do that, do not opt for the hardcover version, because the paperback version has 3 additional chapters. It will soon have 2 more, as I'm going to re-release it, although it'll be a while before that happens. I urge you to do that. This is Roger Stone, and if you're just tuning in, this is the Stone Zone. Now we're going to be joined by a man who's taking on a very important task. Personally, I think Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina is the single worst rhino in the U.S. Senate. Who can forget him calling the White House counsel on January 6th and insisting that President Trump would be removed under the 25th Amendment? Even that claim is false, because the U.S. Senate has no role whatsoever in that, and there is no basis for his claim. A couple months ago, I was at a reception at Mar-a-Lago with my wife, and Senator Graham was there. It was outside by the swimming pool. He had the swimming pool to his back. It was only about, 2 feet away from the swimming pool, with his back to the pool. And when I got a devilish grin on my face, my wife looked at me and said, "Don't you dare. Don't you dare. The Secret Service will be on you and throw you out of here in seconds, and you'll never be allowed back in." So I didn't push him into the pool, but I have to admit, I wish I had. Joining us now, Mark Lynch, a proud South Carolinian who has just announced that he will challenge Senator Lindsey Graham in the Republican U.S. Senate primary. Mark Lynch, welcome into the Stone Zone.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you so much for having me on today. And I hope if he'd gotten pushed in, there wasn't a towel.
Listen, you're doing the Lord's work here. A courageous decision on your part. I know you weighed running for governor. You made a very strong first-time race for the state Senate. You're not a career politician. You're a successful businessman. You're also a devout Christian. We exchanged texts last night, and I love the way when I pointed out to you how uphill and difficult this will be, you pointed out that I was thinking in a earthly realm, and I needed to start thinking in a godly realm. And it is true that in the Bible, every great battle in which the forces of the Lord are incredibly overwhelmed, they're always victorious. Lindsey Graham's record speaks for itself. He is a backstabbing weasel, I don't know why the president keeps him around, other than perhaps that old dictum from The Godfather that you should keep your friends close and your enemies closer. He is a fish-faced enemy of the people, and he relishes his role in undercutting the party and occasionally the president, yet he is the first guy to want to show up at Mar-a-Lago and get his picture taken. It is a problem, and we discussed this that by long standing tradition, the South Carolina primary is an open primary. That means that anybody of either party or people who are in no party are allowed to vote. And traditionally, candidates like Lindsey Graham have survived because hundreds of thousands of left wing Democrats, realizing that in South Carolina, the Democrat nominee has little chance of winning a general election, cross over to vote in the Republican primary to give us candidates like Lindsey Graham. I've talked to many of my friends in South Carolina about changing this rule. Prior to your expressing an interest in this race, they always told me the same thing, that it's not possible. Well, with God and Jesus Christ, all things are possible. Even victory under these rules are possible. They told us that Donald Trump could not win in 2016. It was literally an impossibility, except for it happened. They told us in 2024 that he was doomed, that Kamala Harris was soaring to a lead, particularly in the swing states. Of course, we now know all of that polling was false. The fundraising boom that she reported was manufactured and I think quite illegal. But Mark, how do you intend to address the open primary question other than through the very appropriate tool of prayer? But beyond prayer, what can be done?
Well, what can be done is last night, it is being done. We've seen our own chairman of the GOP in our state, Drew McKissick, has sent out an email to everybody, and I didn't see it when we talked last night late, but it's already begun. They're actually working on a bill to close the primary, and a lot of those guys may not be our favorite guys, but God is bringing unification to the party. He sees that how divided it's been with all these different groups, and I believe God is moving us towards one true Republican Party again. God gave me that thought early on before I decided to register with the FEC for this race, that he will unify it. He's bringing people together, and it's him that's going to do it. I can't do it. The battle is his. We've cast that burden to him. We trust in the Lord, and he's using us. We're here fighting hard. Momentum is building in this country like never before from the momentum of we the people who got Donald Trump elected again. And he won in 2020. We all know that. So he's won all three of his elections, but he just didn't get his name honored in the 2020 election, that November 3rd. It was stolen. But God used that to get people educated. And we want to make Republicans Republicans again. We've all sworn to an oath to serve God and fear him and serve in that respect and honor him and our service in this great country that he created for us to work out of. And so he's bringing us all back to him. And we had 4 years of prayer on our knees with that 2 Chronicles 7:14 verse, that we had to all get our individual houses in order so that he can hear our prayers and heal our land. So he's unifying everybody together again. And Donald Trump's been a great leader who hasn't wavered in that and believed and held on. And we're here, and things are rapidly moving in the right direction with the Lord. The people came and helped that happen, not a party. But God's going to let us call it the Republican Party again, unified under him.
Earlier in the show, I had James O'Keefe on. James O'Keefe and I have something in common. He had his home raided by the FBI, particularly outrageous because he's a journalist, and journalism is a perfectly legal activity. This was Joe Biden using the FBI as the Gestapo, his personal Gestapo, because of the embarrassment that was contained in Ashley Biden's diary, which had been given to James O'Keefe. He didn't steal it. He didn't buy it. It was given to him. He actually never published it. Now, when the FBI raided my home at 6 o'clock in the morning, Lindsey Graham fired off a hot letter to the head of the FBI demanding to know who had approved the raid in my home. The FBI never answered. The FBI director never answered that letter, but Lindsey didn't really care. He got the headline he was looking for, trying to act like he was doing the right thing without really doing the right thing. There was no follow-up letter, by the way, or subpoena to come up to the Senate and explain who had ordered this unnecessary raid on my home, which, by the way, cost the American taxpayers $1.1 million because the government was on shutdown. And therefore, all the agents were being paid time and a half. I got that number, by the way, from someone, a whistleblower in the Miami FBI office who was opposed to the raid, but didn't speak up in opposition to it at the time. The Lord calls on us to speak up, not to hide our candle under the bushel, as they say. I commend you for having the enormous courage to take this race on. Your governor, Henry McMaster, is one of the best governors in the United States. I've known him back to the time that he was a U.S. attorney under Ronald Reagan. He is a man of faith. He's a man of strong leadership. Had the courage to support President Trump over a former South Carolina governor, a colleague of his, because he knew that President Trump was a much better person for the job. He was for Donald Trump in 2016, early, when others said that Trump couldn't possibly win. The nominee would clearly be Jeb Bush. It's amazing how here in Florida, people don't even remember Jeb Bush. He didn't go down as a great governor. His name never comes up. He left kind of no mark. It's a remarkable thing. Mark, have you obviously, you're a man of great success, and under federal election law, you're allowed to donate as much to your own campaign as you wish. But I have a feeling that across this country, outside of South Carolina, across this country, there are going to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of small and medium-sized donors who are going to want to join this cause. I think you're going to be able to raise millions of dollars to do what needs to be done here to remove Lindsey Graham to the U.S. Senate. I know you just made this decision. Have you yet set up a website and a way where folks can give?
We have a splash page set up, ready to go with an Anodot account. Yes, sir. It's going to take we the people to do it like we've done with Donald Trump. It's going to take a unified effort in prayer and giving and working to help this campaign. The people want this. They want Lindsey gone. And the traction from that has been huge so far, just after 24 hours, with how much everything is going viral across X and whatever, and the natural search engine optimization and all the holistic campaign energy is heated up everywhere. People are calling in. God's blessed us with the money to do this. We still need all the rest of the money to compete in a campaign like this. So help us, join us. But it's ready, and we're solid, and we're moving super fast and working hard, working till 2 in the morning every night. I'm worn out, but God gives us that energy to keep going. It's all about Him. So, yes, thank you, everybody that believes in this cause. And go to our splash page on our website. It's Lynch for Senate. And you can see us at Lynch SC on Facebook. And you can just search Mark Lynch and get to know who I am and join this campaign. This is our fight. It's not mine. It's all of us. We need the right people that Donald Trump doesn't have to worry about under him working in the U.S. Senate for our state. And I'm a little concerned, just a little bit, that I guess it's an incumbent protection thing that our governor and Tim Scott have supported Lindsey Graham. So whatever that means, I know there's all kind of reasons they stay together, but we got to help new people get in. When the wrong people are in, we got to get them out. And so I'm not sure what kind of message that sends to the state citizens when McMaster's and Tim Scott announced they were supporting Lindsey. That's not a good thing to be affiliated with, and it won't be real popular. And I don't believe it's the right thing, because they're not in touch with the sentiment and the concerns of the voters out here. So God's brought me into this, and the right people are supporting me. And anyway, God's people are speaking, and they've expressed their desire for me to run. They've asked me, and every time anybody that knows me has ever asked me, "Are you ever going to run again?" And I said, "What would you have me run for?" And they said, "Please take Lindsey Graham out." So I'm answering that call. Send me.
Folks can go to lynchforsenate.com, lynchforsenate.com. We just had it up on the screen. It's right there again. Please send the most generous contribution you can, because this is a grassroots movement. I guess what I was driving at is that Governor McMaster can do something far more important than endorsing you. He can sign legislation closing the primary, and he should do that. And he's a good man. I'm going to pray that he uses his discernment to do that. Tim Scott, that doesn't surprise me. He's a neocon. He'd send another $10 billion to Ukraine tomorrow if they asked for it. I don't think he's a bad man. I just think he's a misguided man. I honestly think that the more important thing, of course, would be closing the primary so that radical leftists cannot swamp the primary to try to prop Lindsey up, which is, of course, what has happened in the past. Democrats are smart enough to know that whoever the Republican nominee for the Senate is going to be elected. Therefore, there'll be no action or excitement in the fight for the Democrat nomination. So leftists who love Lindsey Graham for all the obvious reasons are going to try to flood into the Republican primary to defeat Mark Lynch. We need to stop that from happening, and I'm going to pray that Governor Master, and more importantly, the members of your legislature be enlightened and they do the right thing. And I'm hoping that Henry McMaster, who I'm telling you is a good man, will sign that legislation. That would be the most important thing that he could do for your candidacy. This is hard work.
Roger,
go ahead, please.
Excuse me. I just wanted to add one more thing about that. Like President Trump brought up, what had Kamala and Joe Biden done the 4 years they had the ability to serve? Why would it be different? Our governor, our attorney general, our U.S. senators have known. How long have they known these primaries are open, and it's affecting our state to allow enemies to get in that way? We saw it in my state Senate campaign. From 5 to 7 o'clock, all these angry voters started pouring in. They were voting for Lindsey, and they were voting against me, because that's what they do. And so we can't, I don't have any people in my organization here at our business that work for our competitors. I don't think Donald Trump has that in his business that he had before and still has while being president. And so we can't have people like that are rhinos. That's a nice word for it. I think it's more of a treasonous type of situation. If good people that grew up in the United States that run with a sworn oath to God to protect this country against foreign or domestic enemies have been pulled left into a party that when Obama was president, they voted in Charlotte, 100 miles from here, to take God out of that party. So if you don't have God, what do you have? So I hate to see that that's crept up into the Republican Party, and we've got people that are not doing the right thing all through the years of their service until it's time to campaign again. Then they start talking good talking points to try to win an election again, and they go back and they're stabbing us in the back with everything they do. So who are they? It's time to get those people out. I'm so thankful that Trump, with Godspeed, warp speed with God, is changing America, and he's getting everything that's evil gone. Let me help do that. I'll serve the president without wavering.
It is important to note, actually, from a historical point of view, the open primaries actually served South Carolina well in the past. In 1964, Strom Thurmond, a former Democrat governor, a Democrat U.S. senator, decided as a matter of conscience that he had to support Barry Goldwater over Lyndon Johnson, and he made the decision to become a Republican. Now, he could have just stayed in office, but he insisted that the people needed to be in on this decision. So he resigned from the U.S. Senate to stand in a special election as a Republican, and he was fighting against the Barnwell gang. And there was a major effort to try to defeat him in the primary, but millions of conservative, probably hundreds of thousands of conservative Democrats crossed into the Republican primary to save Strom Thurmond and send him to the U.S. Senate, where he was a champion for liberty and the Constitution and a strong national defense for longer serving than any senator in history. So this has served the state well in the past, but it no longer serves the state well. It's been corrupted and perverted, particularly by those liberals in Charleston. So this does.
We're in different times now. Yeah, we're navigating through different times now, right? There's a lot of things we used to do in my business we don't do anymore. It doesn't work. We had to change and adapt to the right way today to win. So we want to bring integrity back to our elections.
Mark, I could not agree more. I just had to prove to our listeners that I'm older than dirt.
Sure.
And I remember.
No, you're not. You got many good years to go, sir. Thank you for what you're doing.
Well, again, folks, I want to appeal to you. Please go immediately to lynchforsenate.com, lynchforsenate.com. $25, $50, $10, $100, $1,000. I think the limits now are $3,500. As my advisor here tells me. But send whatever you can. Every penny will be appreciated. This is a grassroots movement. We can't rely on Mark. Mark's got the ability to pay for this himself, but we shouldn't call on him to do that. He'll do his part, but we need to do our part. This is probably going to be the hottest, most important Senate race in the country. I think, Mark, you're very wise to start early. Many folks are going to try to discourage you, but I've already learned you're a man who cannot be discouraged because you put your faith in the Lord. And I know you prayed.
Amen.
I know you prayed over this decision. I've learned to pray over the big decisions in my life as well as the small decisions. And he's led you on this path. And is the path of righteousness. It is the correct path. I believe you're going to win, but even if you don't win, it means you got into the arena to fight for the right thing. But you will win if you believe you will win. You will win if you believe that God is on your side, and God is on your side because we know Lindsey Graham's record. He does not stand up for the things that we believe in. He is probably extraordinarily vulnerable. I haven't seen a legitimate poll yet, but his treachery cannot be underestimated. I know of his backstage role in the questions over the confirmation of RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel. Now he's finally gotten in line, but he would tell you one thing while behind the scenes he was trying to rally the rhinos to vote against the president's nominees. So he himself didn't want to leave his fingerprints on it. It's kind of like when Lyndon Johnson wrote the Southern Manifesto to destroy the 1958 Civil Rights Bill. He wrote it, but he didn't sign it because he wanted to run for president in 1960. He didn't want the stigma of being the segregationist and racist that he was. Yet he was propping up those who put an amendment into the 1958 Civil Rights Bill that said that if you violated that law, you would be tried in not a federal jury, but before a state jury. Well, in 1958, in states like Mississippi or South Carolina, no black man would be acquitted by an all-white jury, and no white man would be held accountable by an all-white jury. And he knew it. And that poison pill amendment was written by Lyndon Johnson, but he didn't put his name on it. You see, it's the same shady tactics that Lindsey Graham uses. Just another reason why we need to get this duplicitous weasel out of the U.S. Senate. All right, I am going to close the show here. Mark, I'm going to ask you to lead us in a moment of prayer. I want to pray for the safety of our president, first and foremost, because I believe, well, they tried to kill him twice, and they're not above trying to kill him again when they see this extraordinary change he's bringing to our country and the fact that he is moving swiftly. I just read, for example, that the president has ordered Pam Bondi and signed an executive order to have Pam Bondi fight anti-Christian bias by the Justice Department. This proves once again the hand of God. So we have just 1 minute left. Mark, why don't you lead us in a final prayer?
Love to. Thank you so much. Heavenly Father, we just come to you now, and I pray for the unification in your name, your Son's mighty name, the name above all names, Jesus Christ, who came and gave his life for every one of us. There's no greater love than he that would lay down his life for his friends, you tell us in John 15:13. But in the next verse, John 15:14, you tell us, I call you my friends if you are obedient to my commands. We're all called to serve that are yours, that are your children. It's a faith issue sometimes. But Lord, I pray that you forgive me for when I have disbelief or fear creeps in, because fear's a sin. I trust you, God, and you only, the one true God. And I thank you that because we're your children and this is your country that you founded with men of faith who came here to be free to worship you, that they bled for you and they did whatever they could do, just like your son Jesus did, to change everything and right it and correct it and erase the sins through your blood. There's been many followers here in our nation that have fought and bled for this great nation. I thank you for the perseverance and faith of Donald Trump, that no matter what, he never gave up, and he fought, and just fought harder when more persecution came. Give us all that faith to let our burdens go to you and trust you when Davids have to face Goliaths, because we know that we can do it with you. Everything is possible with you, Father God. So we dedicate this whole thing, and to all the other people that are willing to throw their name in the hat and fight for this great country, that trust in you, Father God. Give them favor. Protect them. Protect their families. Bring favor to their campaigns as we stand for what is true. The name of Jesus, we dedicate this whole thing to. In Jesus' mighty strong name, amen.
Amen. God bless you. Thank you very much for our guest today, Mark Lynch, the next United States Senator from the state of South Carolina.
Thank you, Roger. God bless you too. Thank you.
All right, folks, I want to remind you one more time, you can always see the Stone Zone, 4 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Eastern at worldviewtube.com, worldviewtube.com. And if you don't catch it there, well, you can catch us on Rumble at 8 p.m. You do that by downloading the Rumble app, and then go to rumble.com/Roger Stone. Follow us there. You see the little green button. Set yourself a notification so you don't miss any of the great programming here in the Stone Zone. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?